What's up, Buttercup? Welcome back to my channel. Today's video is all about Romantasy. What is Romantasy? And why is it so popular all of a sudden? Romantasy is simply romance and fantasy, but note that the romance part is of course at the forefront because these are books that are set in a high fantasy world, but it is all about the romance beats. What are the romance beats? Well, we have a main character that has a meet cute with the love interest. Then they get together and then something breaks them up, whatever that may be. It totally depends. Then finally something brings them back together, or someone's bring them back together, and they have a happily ever after. Or if it's a romance series, then it's a happily ever after for now. The book series does have to have a happily ever after, no matter what. It's not even considered a romance if there is not a happily ever after. The fantasy aspect is secondary, and I think a lot of people understand that that is secondary because a lot of the world building and the magical systems and rules, not the best in a lot of the romantasy out there, but it is really about a reader wants to read a romance in a high fantasy setting, but they don't 100% care about the fantasy. It's the romance that they're very interested in. And I know a lot of readers and writers are wondering, why is there so many romantasy books the past couple of years? Well, it gets a little deeper, but it's basically a simple thing of the publishing houses are very, very big into obviously making money. And what is the market trends? What's in the zeitgeist? What's popular from indie writers? And it happened to be romantasy, though that really started with Sarah J. Maas. It's been a long time. However, there was a jump with Sarah J. Maas and there was a little dip in there and some other things became more popular. But now there's a big jump back into romantasy because of Fourth Wing. And now you see a bunch of other traditionally published writers and indie writers jumping on that, what we would say, writing to market trend. What is the trend? It's romantasy. What are the tropes that are very popular that readers are talking about over and over and over again in person and really online? And if you can write fast enough, it doesn't matter if you're traditionally published or if you're indie published. They're both doing it. Let me just say that right now. They are both doing this market trend to write romantasy. You, as a writer, editor, agent, even the publishing houses with their marketing section are going out and they're looking at the trends that are popular within romantasy, because we've already covered that romantasy is huge right now. So they're going to look at the trends within the romantasy top 100, more so like top 50. And they're going to study that no matter if they are indie or traditionally published. If they can write fast enough, they can jump on that market trend of, let's say it's a academy in the middle of nowhere in this high fantasy world, but it's romance. And maybe there's a bunch of elves and vampires and stuff. You know, we're just throwing out some hot ticket tropes. Elves, vampires, academy. I obviously don't write to market trend, but I know that a lot of people are very annoyed, confused, frustrated at the state of the romantasy being very, very popular. And I've seen a lot of people confused at the concept of romantasy. A book is not romantasy if they do not have the capital R romance beats. That is the genre expectation. And then you also have the genre expectation, somewhat, of high fantasy. But the fantasy aspect is secondary. So I do completely understand the concept of fantasy writers going in thinking that this is like high fantasy with romance. It's not. And then they are disappointed because the magic and the world building and the character arcs expected of high fantasy are kind of sort of there. Really focused on is the romance aspect. And that's what those readers want. They want the romance in a kind of sort of high fantasy world. And for quite some time, many years in fact, it has been in the zeitgeist. Now, does it go up and down? Like I said, yes, there were peak times with Sarah J. Maas, and that was going strong for a couple years. Then it kind of dipped a little bit and some other things became popular in the marketing trend zeitgeist, and we were on hold for just a little bit, not a long time, because then we jumped right back up with the romantasy being the forefront of the marketing trend for readers and writers, of course, and for publishing houses. And we are pretty much just going strong here with that trend. I also do want to mention that the writing is more so simplified, to be kind of nice about it. The writing is not flowery for the most part. It is not in depth. There's no big words. The descriptions are sometimes, maybe half the time, very shallow. And the main characters, a little bit of a Mary Sue and a Gary Sue going on. That is, however, not a genre expectation for romance or high fantasy. That is more of a writing choice that a lot of publishers and indie writers are choosing to do for a number of reasons. A lot of it is because the internet has really taken over the younger generations and also the older generations, because so many people are addicted to the internet. But the attention span is very small, and they want to make money. Yes. Not a shocking concept, but sometimes people are very shocked to hear that. The publishers, the writers, agents, editors, they want the money. So they are going to make the decision a lot of the time to simplify the writing, even simplify the magic and the world building, especially when the younger generations that have a reading comprehension issue, they're going to start the first chapter, and if it's too difficult for them, they're not going to continue, more than likely. Now, it's interesting to see, but it goes with the high fantasy concept, that these books are usually chunky monkeys, like more than 500 pages. But with the high fantasy, and namely epic fantasy, the minimum word count requirement is 95,000 words. If you're under 95,000 words, you have not written an epic fantasy, and you really haven't, arguably, some people will say not, but for the most part, a lot of people will say you haven't really written a high fantasy novel because there's so much world building, like what are you doing here, right? But the simplified writing needs, in many ways, more space, because we are also jumping on the writing to market trend, and you're pushing in a lot of tropes and themes and how to craft a story that's simpler but also in line with the romance genre and kind of sort of in the high fantasy genre. And a lot of those tropes take up time and space in a book, like miscommunication. I know you all hate the miscommunication trope, but the majority of readers in romance absolutely adore the miscommunication trope. And you see that a lot in Romantasy. But if there was not a miscommunication trope in any sort of area within those romance beats, then where's the book? Yeah, you would have a completely different book. But that book is what, per marketing research from the publishing houses and from indie writers, that's what readers want in that genre. So if you're reading a Romantasy book and you're not part of the Romantasy genre where you have those reader expectations and you enjoy these tropes and you are, as a reader, consciously or unconsciously following those marketing trends because that's exactly what you want to read, then yes, you're going to be very disappointed. And this goes for every single genre and subgenre. There are market expectations and what is writing to market, not what is writing to market trend. What is writing to market? That means that you have chosen a genre or a subgenre and you hit those expectations and those beats. And if you do not hit those reader expectations or beats that make that genre, then you have not written to market. Like I said, but I just want to say again, the writing to market trend really happens if you can follow those market trends online and you can write fast enough. So, for example, there are a lot of Romantasy books with a mortal young woman and a male elf who is usually a prince or a king. And she is usually, not always, because it depends on the trope, at that given time of the research where she is kidnapped or there is some type of situation where she has to live with the elf king or prince. And that would be their meet cute, even if you don't think that the kidnapping is a meet cute, I totally understand. But in a romance context, there is always going to be a happily ever after at that end. So it doesn't matter what happens really in between, they're going to end up together. But how do we get there in those beats? That's the important part. That's where you can create, if you want to, originality around those romance beats. However, we're getting into, I would say, a little dangerous territory when we're writing to market trend and we're writing to sell. And what is writing to sell? And you're kind of seeing it a lot in Romantasy. You're definitely seeing it in lit RPG. Writing to sell. And indie writers and traditionally published writers do this. So it's not one or the other, but they do the basic research of what is a very popular genre or subgenre that's making a lot of money because it's trending, because for whatever reason, it's in the zeitgeist. And it doesn't even matter why, for the most part. Sometimes that helps, and then sometimes you can't really even figure out because humans are very complicated creatures. And what happens in the zeitgeist that then becomes the trending subgenre or genre, and just sometimes is what it is. And then other times you can really pin it down. Like if there's a vampire movie that comes out and vampire romance pops up, well, here we are. But I digress. The writers that write to sell will find those very, very popular genres and subgenres, will at the very least read 20 books in the top 50 of the bestsellers list, if not 50 or even 100. You want to go hardcore with that. Some of them do. And they will annotate and they will analyze sentence by sentence, chapter by chapter to break down that story. And what are the main characters' names? Where are they from? What do they look like? How are they written? What is the arc? What is the character arc? What is the story arc? What are the tropes that are in the story? So on and so forth. Then they write that book, and the marketing research is not done yet. What are the trends for the titles? What are the trends for the title series? What are the cover trends? And even what are the trends that these books are placed on Amazon and other retailers regarding categories, because you can only have 3 categories. So it's very important to get those categories right. So what are basically other writers, indie or traditionally published writers, doing for this right to sell market? If done properly, you can make 7 figures. And there are quite a few romantasy writers doing the right to sell situation. I would say the big difference is that a lot of the time, right to sell is not about the art. It's not about enjoying that genre or subgenre. It's about making bank. At least for the writing to trend, the writers enjoy romantasy. They read romantasy before getting into the writing. But writing to sell is often one writer with multiple pen names, and they are finding the very hot ticket, and they are extremely organized and mathematical and looking at a book from someone else and kind of sort of copy and pasting, in the sense that yes, there are going to be things that have been changed, but they're giving what the readers want. And some readers really push back on that. I totally understand. But it is enough that they can make $200,000 a year writing to sell in XYZ, pick your genre or subgenre. And when that stalls out and the money is not flowing back in, then they're going to jump to another genre or subgenre and rinse and repeat. I can't say statistically how many romantasy writers are doing the right to trend versus writing to sell, or even just simply writing to market, and they enjoy romantasy even before it was cool, and they just happen to now have a maybe 4-year-old book that just jumps up the charts because this trend of romantasy, this zeitgeist of I want romance in a high fantasy world with these specific tropes, has just stumbled upon this particular writer, and now it's a really popular book. I can't 100% say what those statistics are, but those are the 3 main types of writing, as you would say, that's going on with romantasy at this point in time. And it's the same for every other genre. There is a little bit of a change in the zeitgeist where writers and publishers are seeing that the trend is waning, right? And they are trying to salvage the royalties. And I get it in a way, but what happens is the publishers and the indie writers are stating that a romantasy book, full stop, romance in a high fantasy world, is actually high fantasy with romance in it. Not the case. So that's false marketing. That is not the correct marketing strategy. Has it helped a couple of writers? I'm sure it has. However, that type of marketing strategy, if you do it enough, will upset readers. And I've already seen it. That's why I'm here today, because people are confused. What is romantasy? Why is this book or these 15 books in the epic fantasy or high fantasy or sword and sorcery section on Amazon? I don't understand what's going on. Yeah, at this point, I do see a waning of a romantasy boom, and what writers and publishers are trying to do is to grab other people from romance or fantasy, namely it's actually fantasy at this point. They've already got the romance readers. They want to bring in that high fantasy or just fantasy lovers, and the marketing is, yes, this has romance in it, and does, yes, but it's fantasy, and I know you love fantasy. So here's a pretty cover, and I swear I'm lying, but I swear it is high fantasy. It's not romance. There's romance in it. Okay, fine, it's really heavy romance, but no, it's high fantasy. You see how that the circular trying, almost begging to get you to read the romantasy book when you're actually just interested in high fantasy or epic fantasy or sword and sorcery or dragons and mythical creatures, right? I disagree with that type of marketing. I think that is borderline lying, if not outright lying, depending how you word that. And in the long run, it is not going to be helpful. From what I've noticed is that when people, no matter if they're indie or traditionally published, they start trying to pull other readers from different genres and they're basically lying about what the book is, then there's some desperation there. And lastly, I just want to point out, why is romantasy so popular right now? And I think because a lot of people are struggling, and they've been struggling for quite some time. And this is basically junk food, books, fun, entertaining. I need to shut off my brain because I've been working for 10 hours a day, and I just checked my bank account and I have $25 left over after paying my bills. My life is a bit terrible right now, and they just don't want to think about anything. They want the drama. They don't want something that's complicated. They want a simplified writing style so they can get through it really fast, or at least not take like 4 months out of their year to read just one book. And they want to have a fantasy of a romance with a handsome prince, warrior, king, whatever that title is in that particular romantasy book. And they have to at least relate to the main character, if not see themselves as the main character. That would be the fantasy aspect of the romance section. I'm not talking about the magic and the fantasy stuff. I'm talking about, why is romance so popular? It's the fantasy aspect of love, but it's always going to end up with a happily ever after. And that's not the case in real life. For many, many people, a happily ever after does not happen. But in romantasy, no matter what, this couple will always end up together at the end. And that's what a lot of readers want to have in their personal lives or in their reading. Yes, there's a lot of spice involved lately, but it does depend on the writer and the spice level, so not every single one of them is dirty, right? There seems to be a trend with spiciness in the bedroom or in a wagon or wherever you want to do it. And that part is a bit more complicated. Don't want to go too deep on that because it could probably be a whole other video, but I think there's a lot of issues with loneliness, with being unable to connect with people in person for various reasons. Of course, the fantasy aspect that's always been there even without the internet, and that's why the Harlequin romance books in the 80s and 90s were really popular. And I'm sure a bunch of other things regarding the smexy time and romantasy. But it's still actually a trend to have romantasy at this point be a little spicy. And that was started by Sarah J. Maas. So it has not ended. It has just gotten spicier, I would say. But that is what the majority of readers want within romantasy. And is there clean romantasy or is there wholesome romantasy? I'm sure is out there somewhere. However, that is not the reader expectation. So those books can certainly be out there, and I'm 100% certain there are romantasy books that are not spicy that are out there. However, are they popular? Are they selling? I can't say one way or another because I haven't seen them. So indication means that the spiciness of the romantasy is way more popular. Therefore, the books that are not meeting the expectations, even that small part, you would think that's a small part, it's a huge part at this point. So if you are interested in romantasy, but without the spice and maybe a little more depth overall, and maybe not a simplified writing style, you will have to do some digging. If you want fantasy with romance, then you can certainly find a lot of fantasy books like that. But I just want to remind you that romantasy is a subgenre within romance. So it's not part of fantasy, it's part of romance, and it has to have those genre expectations in the forefront, and then the fantasy is secondary, and that's where a lot of people are getting upset. And I totally understand that. But if you just keep in mind that romantasy is mainly about the romance, then you can figure out what book in the top 50 or top 100 or on Goodreads, which one is a romantasy and which one is not. The description is going to be heavily about the romance, the relationship, overcoming the breakup beat within the story. And then it might also talk about Academy, dragons, whatever, what is it about? Fourth Wing. Yeah, Dragon Academy. Okay. But that's secondary. And that fantasy aspect brings together the love interests and makes them interact to then get together, break up, and then get back together again and have a happily ever after. I hope this video on what romantasy is and why it's popular helped you in better understanding the subgenre within romance. If you have any other questions about this, leave your question down below, and I can't wait to hear from you about this topic in the comments as well. Thank you so much for watching, and have a great rest of your day. Bye!